Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of the Turning the Tide 9/11 Justice Conference right here in D.C. We have the great pleasure of being joined by researcher Jonathan Cole. How are you today?
Very good. Very
Fantastic.
good. I'm doing great.
Before we get started, let the audience know exactly what you do for a living and how you came to the world of 9/11 justice and this movement.
Sure. Well, I was a civil engineer. I got registered back in 1984, so I've been doing it for over 40 years now.
Okay.
Just a normal civil engineer, working on various projects through my life. I got involved in this movement because in late 2007, I happened to watch a video of the North Tower coming down, and kind of did a little bit more research after that, and then saw a video of Building 7, which of course gets a lot of people into it.
Yeah.
And but prior to that, I just trusted everything and believed the official story and had no reason to question anything. But then when I saw the actual building collapses, or put that in quote, I guess, the actual buildings coming down, that kind of changed my worldview. At first I tried to debunk it, if you will,
absolutely,
because I didn't want to believe it. It really challenged me. It challenged all my beliefs. So
absolutely,
I first tried to dismiss it. And unfortunately, it's kind of, once you see something, it's hard to unsee it. So I did a lot of research on it and kept checking things on all angles, and sadly came up to the conclusion that those buildings were brought down by controlled demolition. So that kind of got me into it. I started in about, I think it was around 2010. I decided to do some experimental videos.
Okay.
There was so many good researchers before I even got involved in this. But I thought the one thing that really was sort of lacking was kind of real world experiments to either kind of prove or disprove what was going on, because I'm kind of one into what's called the experimental method or the scientific method.
Absolutely.
And the cornerstone of the scientific method, the central portion of it, is compare it to real world or compare it to experiments.
That's
what nature said, because people lie, but nature doesn't lie.
Yeah.
So I started doing that. And one of my earliest experiments had to do with what was called the source of the sulfur that was found in it was in Appendix C of what's called the FEMA ASCE report.
Okay.
And that was some steel that was found that perplexed some what they called Firewise professors from Worcester Polytech. They couldn't figure out really what caused some intergranular melting. And so they said it was, at the time, one of the deepest mysteries. The New York Times, I think, said it was one of the deepest mysteries of 9/11 is how did that steel experience that intergranular melting? Because fire couldn't do that. They've never seen that before.
Yeah. Fire on its own wouldn't cause steel to melt in that kind of way.
Correct.
Not at that temperature. Anyway.
Not at that temperature, right? Yeah. So office fires can't melt steel, first of all, and the more important thing was it had what's called eutectic intergranular melting.
Okay.
And the key was the source of the sulfur. Where'd that sulfur come from? And so nobody did any experiments on that. And sort of the official story, which isn't really official. It's not really from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Kind of what you have is you have the media kind of explaining the story, like the BBC. And they came out and they said that the source of the sulfur that caused that was from gypsum drywall, because gypsum drywall, which is a protectant that you usually put as a fireproofing around steel, does have some sodium.
Some sulfur content.
Sulfur, but it's not. But it's not. It's a different type of sulfur. It's not elemental sulfur.
Yes, exactly.
So the question was, well, is that really true? So I did an experiment. It's called 9/11 experiments, the mysterious eutectic steel, in which I took a piece of steel beam and I packed it full of drywall, and I packed it full of diesel fuel and aluminum and all kinds of things that they said was probably in the stuff. I packed it all around there, and I burned it in a comparable hot fire for a couple days to see if there was any actual intergranular melting, to see if that theory was correct. And it came back, no, there was no damage whatsoever. So that was one of my first ones to kind of disprove that, despite what they're telling you on the TV, nature says that's not really what happened.
Well, and when it comes to the melting, I watched a lot, but I remember distinctly getting the phone call from my mother after the first plane hit. I watched for easily almost 20 hours from the that point. Saw the second building, saw WTC7 on air, and even at that point, like, it took me a while to question things. But it was one of those. Just a year or so ago, I guess, I was on the road for a client and watching a bunch of documentaries on History Channel on 9/11, as 9/11 was, the anniversary was. And one of the things that I saw that I had never seen was actual steel and other material, like, pouring. Like, like it almost looks like a pyroclastic lava flow coming out of the side of the building, like, to the extent of melting metal to that. Especially steel, you have to have an incredibly hot, like, foundry level temperatures, and sparks are flying out. And sure, the aluminum on the side of the building could be sparking. But the idea of the metal flowing in a liquid form like that out of the side of the building, and this was on a History Channel documentary. It wasn't like somebody's like, hey, look at how the buildings were blown up.
Right.
So it kind of took my mind back to be like, oh my God, I can't believe they're actively showing that, which is one of the huge points that you guys bring up of, you ain't going to get that kind of steel and metal flow from that kind of fire or heat.
Correct. Correct. Because it's impossible.
Yeah.
So you need 2,800 degrees to melt steel or iron. And even in the NIST report, the maximum steel, they have two things. They have the maximum air temperature and the maximum steel temperature. And even the maximum air temperature is like 1,000 degrees colder than what it would take to produce that. And so, that's another tell of the thing. You saw this molten reddish orange material falling down outside of the tower after the plane impact, whether it hit, whether it disturbed something or not. And so the question is, well, what is that stuff? And so a lot of people, or some people, the official would NIST suggested, well, that could be molten aluminum from the plane mixed with furniture and things like that. Well, I did a video on that also. And the problem with that theory is that when you have molten metal and you have furniture and office furnishings in there, you have different densities. And so the office furniture or anything on that material would burn off. Okay. So you would have, it's almost like if you have molten aluminum, you can put a billiard ball on top and it won't mix with it. So it won't mix. So it's coming off at this reddish material. And they say, well, maybe it's molten aluminum. Well, the problem is molten iron as it comes out, it's going to be reddish, and it's going to be reddish in daylight. Okay. And that's the key. You can't have molten, it has to do with what's called emissivity and reflectivity. And I did a little thing on that. But anyhow, the bottom line is, it's the key that you have that reddish orange color in daylight, which cannot happen with molten aluminum. So it's not molten aluminum. It's most likely molten iron. Yeah. And the reason it's iron versus steel, and steel is mostly iron, but the reason a lot of us suspect it's iron is because iron is a byproduct of a thermitic reaction. And so later on, I did what's called another video called 9/11 Experiments, the Great Thermate Debate. And that video was to either prove or disprove what thermate can really do. And because the BBC and some other channels, National Geographic came out, and they would have a little pile of thermate or thermite. There's a slight difference between thermate and thermite. Okay, thermite is basically rust, iron oxide, and aluminum. And thermate is thermite with additional sulfur, which ties back to that mysterious eutectic steel. There's a source of the sulfur. So it's a slight variation on thermite. So you'll hear thermate, thermite, and nanothermite, all of them. Anyhow, the bottom line is the BBC, National Geographic tried to, quote, debunk that, there couldn't be any thermite in there because thermite will not cut steel. And so what they did is they put a little pile of thermate or thermite, it doesn't matter, on some steel and burned it in open air, and it just flashes off. It doesn't do anything. Yeah. So I did a video trying to find out, can thermite cut steel or not? And it's called The Great Thermate Debate. It's on my website called Physics and Reasons. Awesome. On YouTube. And you can watch it yourself. I'm just saying this is what nature does. And I did different configurations of it. And the key is to constrain it and to focus it so it actually has a shot at something. Yeah. And it turns out that thermite can certainly melt steel. They use it for for tying railroad tracks together. It's
That's
been around
right.
for 100 years.
Yep.
So to say for the BBC and a National Geographic, oh, it can't melt steel. Well, nonsense. Of course it can.
Yeah.
It burns at 4,500 degrees. It can easily melt steel.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that was another video I did called The Great Thermate Debate to prove what can and can't be done with thermate or thermite, same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, even as somebody who plays with pyrotechnics, things like that, it's the idea of you take a pile of black powder, put it on a table, it just goes. You contain that, it's going to find the weakest point, and that's where it goes out of. That's how an explosion works. That's why a rocket is sealed at one end with a nozzle in the other. All the force comes out of one end, and it propels that way.
That's a great analogy.
Plug that up, it's a bomb.
Or a bullet. A bullet's the same thing.
Exactly.
It goes in a casing, it's constrained, and it's focused, and it shoots.
That's right.
But excellent analogy. Same thing. You put gunpowder on there. You can almost put a piece of tinfoil on it and put the gunpowder there, and it's not going to blow your hand off.
Absolutely.
Unless you constrain it in your hand, and then you better watch out.
It used to be one of the things that we stupidly fooled around with as a kid, was the idea of it just like take a very tiny little lady finger and pop it in your hand and let it go. Like, don't close that hand.
Right.
You're going to end up going to the emergency room maybe, but we do it all day long.
Right.
Because there's nothing containing it. All the force goes up top instead of down bottom, your hand's reflecting it.
Right.
And when you start looking at those things, that was one of the things that was brought up in another documentary that I was watching, was the idea of the explosions that people heard, air quotes there for the listeners who aren't watching. The explosions that were heard by first responders were actually the aluminum being superheated, and granted, not to almost to a point of thermitic, but that being heated, causing a thermite reaction, then the water hitting it, and that exploding in that kind of way. It was the explosions that they heard. But once again, even then, that would not be enough to take out the central columns that would make the building collapse. And one of the things I bring up that we brought up with Richard Gage when he was on, when we promoted the show, there have been no real major changes to the fire codes in high-rise steel structure buildings, either since, and they said that fire is what brought down Building 7. If that's the case, then why zero changes to the fire codes in how we build a large steel frame structure? You know, that's like anybody should be willing to question that, especially if you work or live in a steel frame structure.
Right. And really, if you have any common sense at all, I mean, buildings, the towers are one thing, but Building 7 is you got to be not too swift to see that didn't come down as a controlled demolition. That's an obvious controlled demolition. All columns had to be cut simultaneously on several different floors to allow it to free fall. It went down at free fall. Not even, so free fall acceleration.
Even the point of if you watch building collapses, if you watch controlled demolitions, you will regularly see the fact of, because a penthouse is offset typically on one side or something like that, you see that fall into the footprint. And as that hits the level part, everything else goes down, so that you don't have a weight shift and everything goes to the side and spills out past your contained zone that you've built. And that is exactly what happens in Building 7. Like, as that penthouse roof hits the top of the roof, everything falls.
They pre-weaken and or they hit the core columns first, just a fraction of a second before the rest of them all comes down. So Building 7 is, I mean, if you don't see Building 7, if you don't see Building 7, then I can't help you.
Well, and that brings us to a big point that we've talked about numerous times, and even with Matt Campbell, who was just here, who's been fighting for his family's rights to truth about his brother's death, which is the idea of how do we get people, of course, science is helpful. Science,
it's helpful, but it's not
hugely
everything.
helpful. But even then, there are scientists who are butting up against things and not allowing new data into their data set. And that to me, just as a citizen scientist doing what I do in the world of paranormal research and things, is frightening to me. Scientists who will not allow data into their data set, or even look at something like, why not listen to the first responders who said they heard explosions? The first part of the scientific method is observation and experience, followed by question. then experimentation.
Right.
So there are hundreds and hundreds of people who were there who we trust, once again, same way as our Navy pilots who said, I saw something. Why would you not trust those trained first responders and investigate the possibility of explosion?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is, well, you're absolutely right. Matter of fact, the day that this happened, the preponderance of evidence and the preponderance of all the theories was, oh, they were explosive. That's what brought it down. Yes, the plane hits, but oh yeah, it was obvious. Explosives brought them down. And that morphed to the next day. Oh, no explosives, because it doesn't work, obviously, had the explosives get in there.
Yeah.
But I think to answer your question, was my opinion.
That's the frightening question, is how did the explosives get in there?
Well, they had elevator upgrades. They had
absolutely.
They had a bunch of floor renovations going on. I mean, they had years to plan this thing. But as far as the average person, there's a self-censorship out there. You just kind of self-censor. It's like, that's an untouchable subject. And there's a general fear in Americans. The average person is like, I don't want to talk about that. Because it completely upsets their worldview.
Too big and too nebulous.
Yeah, like what was a movie? You Can't Handle the Truth. A lot of people cannot handle the truth. And it's like, well, okay, then that's if the world you want to live in, that's fine.
Yeah.
Jumping backwards a little bit. So I've also done some analysis. So there's two key things, in my opinion, on the science side. One is the temperature issues, the impossible temperatures. The other one is the motion issues. Okay. So if you look at, we talked about Building 7, that went down at free fall acceleration for like 8 stories, 8 seconds. But if you look at the motion of the towers also, if you measure the roof line of the towers for the first 2 or 3 seconds, you will notice that there is no impact. Let me back up. So if all the columns were severed, let's say, and you have a top section of the towers, and this is the lower, stronger section. Now remember, the lower, stronger section was cold. People were walking down those stairs.
That's right.
Firefighters were going up those stairs. So the notion that the steel melted is
that temperatures
absurd.
Would be intolerable for people.
Right. So people were walking up and down, they were getting out of there. So this top portion above where the plane hit, let's assume that all the columns were severed by fire. They weren't, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
Then let's assume that top section comes down and it's going to impact the colder structure below. Okay, well, when there's an impact, what does that mean? That means there has to be, in layman's terms, a jolt. Okay? There has to be a deceleration in order for that theory to work. Cut all the columns out, drop this down, there's going to be an impact. Okay, or a jolt. The problem is, and this was pointed out early on, okay, by Tony Zambodi and Graham McQueen and David Chandler, that when that came down, when you would expect it to impact, there was no jolt. It continued to accelerate. So how can you have an impact and continue to accelerate? How can you have a point come down when it was supposed to impact, didn't decelerate, and kept going faster and faster and faster? There's only one possibility, and that is if you have some force below there knocking out its supports, it's going to continually accelerate down. Now, the towers didn't come down at free fall acceleration. They came down at about 65, 66% of acceleration, but the key is that there was no negative deceleration. There was no impact as it came down.
Which would have been key in the description that was given in NIST and everything else of the pancake fall, the pancake stack of boom, 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 floor hitting floor. You'd have seen things incrementally stopping in that kind of way. And you don't see that. Instead, you see it blowing out. You just see that distinctive lily pad or lily flower pattern of things going out this way
like
instead of straight down.
Right.
Yeah.
And so interestingly, what a lot of people don't realize, and this kind of blows some people's minds, is you would think that the one event, which was the towers, that killed the most people, over 2,000 people, that should be the most studied building failure in the world.
Yes.
Well, it turns out it's the least studied. And the reason I say it's the least studied is the actual collapse time from the beginning of the first motion of that floor, a roof coming down, to the time when the last core columns fell. People think, it was like 15 seconds or 13 seconds. It wasn't. It was 30 seconds. It's like 30 seconds. It took 30 seconds? Yes, it took 30 seconds. 30 seconds, because what really happened was the top section was blown out. All the other portions as it was coming out was blown out and away. And there was these central core columns, okay, in the truth movement. It's called the spire. Okay, it's on the North Tower.
Yep.
And that stood for 5 or 6 seconds after the roof and everything was on the ground. Well, that means the roof couldn't have gone through and bent those core columns. It's impossible. And the total time and then those finally came straight down. Okay. So there's a bunch of questions. Well, wait a minute. How can any gravity collapse go through there? Whether it's a pancake collapse, there was another theory called the pile driver collapse.
Yep.
Okay. Like it pounded down, this thing pounded down and then destroyed itself back up. Well, that defies physics too. It's impossible. It can't be proved experimentally. So the motions of the tower were never studied by NIST. They did a 10,000 plus page report, okay? And they brought the report all the way to what's called collapse initiation, which means before there was any really downward motion. They just said, and then they said, global collapse ensued. Kind of wash your hands of it.
Yeah.
And then, or collapse was inevitable. Well, yeah, it was inevitable if there's explosives in there.
Yeah,
so the bottom line is, on building 7, they at least attempted to do a computer model of that thing. It didn't really match reality, but at least they tried. They didn't do the same with the towers. They stopped. So the entire analysis stopped before the main event began. Isn't that odd?
Yeah.
So you would think, you know, we have 3,000 people, 2,000 people in there. They were exploded in over 21,000 parts.
Yeah.
Many in a test tube. They weren't crushed.
Yeah.
They were exploded.
I just mentioned to Matt Campbell a while ago, I post things to my Curious Realm group all the time, news articles.
Right.
All of 2-3 weeks ago, they found 5 more people's remains.
Yeah.
Just partial remains, but it was a block or so over.
Right. And there was remains on the top of Deutsche Bank or some roof when they did, but and there were just fragments of people.
Yeah.
And it's sick. It's sick. But
it is.
In any kind of pancake collapse, there's some people still alive in there.
That's right.
There's whole bodies. They may be crushed, but they're not exploded.
Yeah. You aren't going to find a hand a block and a half over.
A fingernail size piece of
Yeah.
They were
where they are obliterated.
They were
bodies.
vaporized.
Yeah.
They were almost vaporized.
Exactly.
Over 1,100 of them were never found.
Yeah.
You don't do that in a pancake collapse. So anyhow, jumping back real quickly. So there's temperature and then there's motion. Those are the two things that I look at.
Yeah.
Okay. So the temperature is just the thermite, and the motion, the downward accelerations, which I link to a lot of other people who've done a lot of research, but one of the videos I just put out almost exactly a year ago is called The Last 30 Seconds. So it's on my YouTube channel. It's under Physics and Reason. It's called The Last 30 Seconds. And what I try to do there is I try to just look at the thing, time it. I have you, the viewer, time it and say, well, did this come down in 13 seconds or 15 seconds? You put a stopwatch on it, you time it. No, it came down in 30 seconds. Well, why is that? Well, when you watch, I break it into 4 phases of collapse and show how it's impossible. Any gravity collapse theory you propose, they're all impossible. So again, sad but true. So anyhow, the last 30 seconds, I would recommend your viewers just check it out. See if you agree or disagree.
And channels like this, I think, are hugely important. When I told a lot of people that I was coming here, the first thing they went into, of course, was the nasty C word of conspiracy theory. And the thing I always bring up on my show is, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists in this country. They're called DAs. It's their job to take a set of data, give you a narrative in a jury box, and take you down that path to hopefully the conviction that they're looking for.
Right.
Those facts may or may not be that, but that's the narrative that they are putting forth.
Correct.
So
and conspiracies do exist.
They do. Otherwise, we wouldn't have people convicted of conspiracy.
Right. Because and 19 hijackers, did they conspire with their box cutters? That's a conspiracy. Yeah. So of course the CIA put out that term conspiracy theory just to use as a slander.
Oh, absolutely.
And to shut you up. I don't want to hear it. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Yeah. I don't care what you call me. Call me anything you want.
Yeah.
Here's the information. Here's the data. You decide.
Exactly. And that's just it. That's what proper science does is data, experiment. And then, as we always say on the show, don't forget that last part after conclusion is an arrow that goes right back to observation and experiment. It is supposed to be a forever wash, rinse, repeat. If science stopped and was set in stone, my son's astronomic chart on his wall would have Pluto on it.
Correct.
It doesn't.
Correct.
It doesn't because, well, in my lifetime, Pluto has come and gone.
Right.
As a planet. Because science continues to evolve.
Right. And not only does science continue to evolve, we learn new things. We don't know everything about that. But the other thing is the individual should evolve. Like for example, I didn't know about this until 2008. I was sort of a late bloomer.
Sure.
And when I figured it, it's okay to change your mind.
That's right.
So when you learn new information, it's like, I believe the official story 100%. Why wouldn't I?
Absolutely.
And then when you learn new things, like, oh, I got to change my mind because I have new information. So anybody who is just locked into their belief system and refuses to change your mind with new information that goes contrary to what your belief system is, then there's something wrong with you, because
right.
you should. It's like science evolving.
Yeah.
The individual should evolve as they learn new information, and
That's
it can
right.
completely change your worldview based on that new information.
And the scientists need to be, I'll say this to the camera, all the scientists out there need to be willing to step outside of your box, because remember, science doesn't live in a box, man. You're supposed to thought experiment fully outside of that box in physics.
I agree.
You're supposed to.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really upset at Avi Loeb right now for his big hyperbolic hypothesis, but it's like, dude, that's what you're supposed to do.
And it's okay to look at something.
Hey, there may be a 5% chance it's this.
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
Let's experiment. Let's do these scientific tests and find out, because that if you don't hypothesize the hyperbolic, then you may never discover Einstein's ring.
Yeah.
Ever.
Right.
Like that wasn't proven till after an eclipse, and he was even panicked that he may have gotten the math wrong and that this other dude was going to solve it before he did, because he was not that great at math, oddly enough.
Yeah.
And
I think the individual, also the one proposing it, should be okay to be proved wrong. Like, as a matter of fact, prove me wrong. As a matter of fact, in a lot of my videos, when I'm trying to say, but if you think I'm wrong, prove me wrong.
That's right.
By experiment and the scientific method. Don't just say I'm wrong.
No.
Don't call me a bunch of names.
Yeah.
Prove it.
Yeah. And that's just it. In science, it's called killing your darlings. And it's one of my favorite terms in the world, is the idea of this is my hypothesis, but when my research associate pokes enough holes in it that it sinks, I got to go back to the drawing board of observation and start over again with a new set of data, a new set of experiments, things like that, to further test the hypothesis. That's what it's supposed to be about.
That's what it's supposed to be about. It's okay to be wrong.
That's right.
When you learn new information, but a lot of people can't handle that. Like I said, their worldview, their belief system, I can't handle this. So.
Well, and especially as things happened in real time. Like, I was a youth minister at the time, and I remember the conversations on Sunday nights with my junior high and high school group of like, how are we dealing with it? There were a couple people that had family, like uncles that were in the towers. And how do we even as a community deal with this? How do we personally deal with it? When you're confronted with a lot of the things that happen, like I said, I saw Building 7 live on TV. But it wasn't until I saw things from Richard Gage and stuff about the collapse many years later that it was like, oh, wow. Until then, I had always been like, hey, every bit of intelligence shows us at the very least it was a new Pearl Harbor, where they had some kind of warning and kind of went like, and what's over there? That's shiny,
Right.
For whatever means
ignore
of
the man
control.
behind the curtain.
Yeah. For whatever means of control, or putting forth, the
narrative,
the laws, the narrative that came afterward, going to war, billions of dollars with Blackwater and contractors, all that kind of stuff. But even that's hard to accept in the moment.
It is.
And I think right now, verging on 25 years, this upcoming year, this is 24 now, I think a lot of victims' families are still looking for justice and are now open to the concept of, maybe there's something to what these physicists and other people are saying, instead of it being a point of personal injury and attack.
Right.
And I can fully understand that being an attack to your paradigm and to the memory of your family member.
Absolutely.
I firmly get that. But at the same time, I think society itself, much like 25 years after Kennedy's assassination, a lot of people were like, whoa, wait a minute, there's something to this multi-gunman thing.
Absolutely. Crossfire.
Yeah, exactly. So there is that window where society begins to open their minds, begins to open their hearts, and begins to go, wait a minute, man, like our government's guilty of a lot of crap.
Yeah, they are.
They may just be, at the very least, complicit in burying the fact that this was going to happen. Right. Because, it's a tough question to get into the fact of, somebody had to plant explosives. Somebody
did.
had to go in and do these nefarious things.
Yep. The laws of nature say so.
That's just
Sorry.
it. And it's disturbing
Yeah.
and it's hard to accept. But I think
Yep.
that we as a society are at a point now at 25 years that we may be ready to accept some of these very hard truths that are there because of good work from people like you, Jonathan.
Well, I hope they do. You know,
Same.
the name of the game is justice. I mean,
That's
there's a
right.
lot of people who are impacted. A lot of people were killed. It just ain't right, as they say, you know?
That's right. And you know, justice isn't a settlement. Justice
No.
isn't money
No.
or anything like that. Justice is people being answerable for what happened and making sure that there are laws and things put in place to assure that it can't happen to others again. That's what justice is.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, you know, people say, well, what are you going to do about it? I say, if nothing else, even if personally, I don't think
shine a light on it.
Yeah, shine a light on it, because then use it for today. Don't be
That's right.
bamboozled today. There's a lot of things happening today where this entity gets blamed and that entity gets blamed.
That's
and,
right.
Oh, wait a second. Maybe it's not. Just remember your history. History is important. You know, you can go back in history and learn what even a false flag is. It goes back to the 1800s. It ain't nothing new.
No.
So learn that even with today's event, don't be gullible and just don't follow whatever you're told.
That's
like
right.
I did.
Yeah.
I did for 7 years. Oh yeah, let's go get them.
Same.
I was wrong. So learn from these things, even if there's not that much justice in the past. Maybe just don't believe them in the future and today.
Absolutely. Jonathan, thank you so much for
All
your
right.
time.
All right. Thanks.
Before we let you go, one last time, let everybody know where they can go to follow your work, where they can go to subscribe to your YouTube channel. Look right there in the camera.
All right.
and
All
let
right.
them all
Well,
know.
there's a couple different places. I have a little YouTube channel. It's called Physics and Reason, one word. I'm kind of shadow banned. If you type me in, you're probably not going to find me, but it's Physics and Reason, one word. That's one place you can find them, all my experiments. The other one is some of mine are on Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, AE911.org, or yeah, AE, I think I believe it. The other one is IC 9/11, International Center for Justice, IC911.org. And they're also reposted on what's called 911speakout.org. So it's in a bunch of different multiple
David's
places.
website.
Yeah, David's website.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, once again, thank you so much for your very honest, open, and candid conversation on this very deep and thick topic today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for your amazing presentation and for being here and being part of the movement.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
While you are online checking out all of Jonathan's work, make sure to stop on by the International Center for 9/11 Justice, IC911.org, as well as Richard Gage, 911.com. And while you're on both of those, checking out all of their amazing work, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. That is where you can find all of the episodes. That's where you can find the embed codes for all of these episodes. That is where you can find all of our amazing coverage from events like Turning the Tide 9/11 Justice right here in DC. When we come back, we will continue our on-site coverage of Turning the Tide 9/11 Justice right here in Washington, D.C. right after this, folks. The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.